You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
As a longtime foreign correspondent, I've worked in lots of places, but nowhere as important to the world as China. I'm Jane Perlez, former Beijing bureau chief for the New York Times. Join me on my new podcast, Face Off, US versus China, where I'll take you behind the scenes in the tumultuous US-China relationship. Find Face Off wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, delicious friends, and welcome to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that's not your history class, with me, your host, Katie Charlwood, history harlot and reader of books. And oh, my dearest deviants, I hope you had a wonderful Easter, Passover, Trans Day of Visibility, yay, etc., etc. I feel like there's a Science-y Day as well that I missed, but I hope you had a great time. I went out for lunch and I actually had really nice chicken wings. Like, the hot sauce on it was probably the first time I've had actual hot sauce in Donegal, like, served somewhere. Like, it's never been this good. It was so good, like, genuinely delicious and But now I've had my fun, and that's my out time is done for most of the month, because now I gotta get to brass tacks. I gotta put my nose to the grindstone and other such metaphors, because I've got the tour at the end of the month. It starts the History Harlot tour, so I'm in like Dublin, Brighton, Manchester, then Glasgow, and each of these shows have a different topic. So the Dublin show is with the Shite Talk History Boys. They're so funny, they're so good. If you are in Dublin, come see us. It's amazing. And I have to do slightly less work for that show, but I'm going to wear a super cute outfit, so I think you should come see me. In fact, I'm going to be wearing super cute outfits for every show. But yeah, the 3 gigs that are in the UK, each one of them has a different topic, and I'm doing them night after night. And I feel like, why do I do this to myself? Like, it's not so bad when you have the same set and you're doing it like night after night, you know? But when you're doing a different thing every evening, 4 evenings in a row, and travelling, and not really seeing any of the places you're travelling in, but it's fine, because I really pinched my time with this one. I was like, I'm going to be as productive as possible. I'm going to do as many different shows in as short a time frame as I physically can, because I'm going to win at touring, which is something which is both normal to want and possible to achieve. If you haven't already got your tickets to come see me, please do that. That would be wonderful. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Because, you know, if this tour goes well, then it makes another tour more viable. It gives me more options to actually come out and go to, like, smaller areas and go out to where you are. Maybe not exactly, like, not your house. Like, I'm not going to be shouting in weird facts about lesbians through your bedroom window. I feel like that's verging on inappropriate. But anyway, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, got your jibber jabber, in fact me. In fact you I will. But first, we've got to get our source on. Our sources are The King's Assassin, The Fatal Affair of George Villiers and James I by Benjamin Woolley. The Golden Age Restored, The Culture of the Stuart Court by Graham Parry. The Popular Murderer by Jessica Mann. Rumour and Common Fame, The Impeachment of the Duke of Buckingham and Public Opinion in Early Stuart England by David Coast. Charles II and the Duke of Buckingham by Charles C. Hanrahan. George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham by Samuel Rawson Gardner. King James and Letters of Homoerotic Desire by David M. Bergeron. History.com, Biography.com, and of course, The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then let's begin. Now, before we get started, I have to talk about pronunciation. Now, it's going to come and bite me in the derriere because I really want to go Villiers, because it's a French name, Villiers, but it's Villiers. I've been told it's Villiers, that's the British pronunciation, and that's what I'm supposed to follow, but it feels weird coming out my mouth, so I'm going to apologise for that from the get-go. But yeah, this is an interesting fellow whose life was sort of chartered by his mother. I'm not saying he's a mummy's boy, but I'm just saying that, like, clearly she had a favourite. George Villiers was born on the 28th of August 1592 in Brooksby, Leicester. That's in England. We're in England for, like, most of this story. He is born to Sir George Villiers, that's right, he's a junior, and Mary Beaumont. Now, Mary is George Sr.'s second wife. So George Sr., he was a minor gentleman. He started off as a sheep farmer who did, pretty well for himself, who becomes the High Sheriff of Leicester and then gets knighted. So he has a knighthood for like a wee period of time. He's the Knight of the Shire until his death. Because knighthoods don't last any longer than that, technically, because you're only a knight as long as you're alive. So there's really no reason to, like, remove someone's knighthood once they're dead, because it technically doesn't exist anymore. It's not a thing. Like, that's just the rule of it, So yeah, George, his first wife, Audrey, she passed away in 1587, and then 3 years later, he marries his beautiful but penniless cousin, Mary Beaumont. Now, from his first marriage, he had, I think, 5 kids. Yeah, so he had 3 boys and 2 girls. He then marries Mary, and they have 3 sons and a daughter. Now, George Jr., he is son number 2. I know we talked about this before in the Dick Whittington episode. Inheritance, the oldest son, the eldest son, he gets the titles, he gets the land, and then a little bit is spread out amongst the rest. So by the time you get to George Jr., who's like the 5th son out of 6, he's not going to be gaining anything. He's not going to get like the lands and the titles. It's not going to be great for him. He's going to have to like make his own way. And the thing is as well, when Mary enters this marriage, she's basically destitute, she's penniless, she's got no money, but somehow she finds a way to send George to France. She's like, you need to be a courtier, you have something about you, there's something special about you, we need to get you just bougied up. So she sends him to France with John Eliot. Now, John Eliot was consistently getting arrested as he got older, because he was very, like, pro-parliament as opposed to being pro-king, and yet got him in trouble quite a bit. But out of these two, George was going to make the bigger splash. So he goes to France, the two of them go to France, and they learn the ways of the court. Much like Anne Boleyn, They learn dancing. Like, it is very important that you know how to dance, like, in the Stuart court. So he learns dancing and fencing and some languages. He gets pretty decent at the old French, as one does when you live in France. He very quickly adopts to courtly behaviour and an absolutely smashing sense of fashion. Like, this fella is just fabulous. Like, he knows how to dress well, and people know it. Like, everybody knows it. And on top of this as well, he has this like charisma and charm. Like he is the man's man, ladies' man, man about town. And he wasn't the only one to notice. So in a name that sounds completely made up, Godfrey Goodman, that's right, the Bishop of Gloucester, he sounds like a superhero character, just steps out the pages of Marvel, like, and now, Godfrey Goodman. Like, is there a more appropriate name for a bishop though? Like, Godfrey Goodman. Like, really? Anyway, he, and I quote, states that George Villiers was the handsomest bodied man in all of England, his limbs so well compacted, his conversation so pleasing, and his general disposition was so sweet. You know what? Actually, that is a pretty elaborate compliment from a bishop. That's like Roger Rabbit writing a love letter to Jessica. 1,000, 1,000. But yeah, it's pretty noticeable that he is fine. Like he's clearly pretty easy on the eye. At some point during this, his dad passes away, 1606, and he's like 14-ish, 13, 14. And so this is when his mum like really pushes him into this sort of courtly, training. And this pans out because when he's 21, he becomes involved in basically an anti-Scottish conspiracy. It's the mildest way I can put it, really. So when James I is crowned James I, because he was James VI of Scotland, because he was named Elizabeth I's, heir, which, could have been Mary Queen of Scots if she hadn't been such a dick, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree with this one, because James, worse. Like, he is a full-blown, combination of his mother and father combined, and that's not a good recipe for anything, right? That'll leave a bad taste in your mouth, which George will soon find out. So when James I, who I will do an episode on at one point, becomes king of the United Kingdom of England and Scotland, right? When he becomes king, he brings with him, a lot of Scottish court. A lot of the courtiers are Scottish. So it is 1614, and there is this hunt going on in Apethorpe, and George Villiers is there, and he catches the king's eye, because of course he does, because he's a 21-year-old strapping, beautiful young man. And people noticed, especially a bunch of English courtiers who really wanted to, balance the scales a wee bit, or, tip them in their favour. So they saw him, and they saw that he was noticed. And they thought, this is the perfect point where they can use him. They wanted to, manoeuvre him into position to become the king's favourite. Now, the favourite is actually a position, which is a political role, it's the king's or queen's most intimate companion, yeah? And the current favourite, Robert Carr, the Earl of Somerset, people weren't too happy with him in general. They were not keen on the fella, and they wanted to, push him out. So being King James' favourite wasn't just a political position in this situation. It was also an actual position, because James, although he was married and had his lineage and whatnot as heirs, he wasn't too fond of the fair sex, to be honest. This is the king who, accused women of being witches, wrote a book on demonology, and was generally an all-round shit to women. Anyway, he liked to sleep with men, especially his favourite, which really puts the favourite in the perfect position to whisper in the king's ear, shall we say. And so this is kind of a coveted position, and the other courtiers were like, we need to get in here. Now, things weren't going well for the Earl of Somerset. He ended up having a falling out with the king because he's having an affair with the married Frances Howard. Clearly King James's pride is, bruised at this situation, and Robert Carr is out. And while news of this scandal made its way up to James's ears, young George Villiers had been put in front of the king in several situations. Like, the courtiers are lobbying to get him into this cupbearer's position. So being the cupbearer basically meant that you would not only just fill his cup, pour in his wine, but you would also keep the king company, amuse him during dinners, events, whatnot. So these dudes go full on Pretty Woman with Villiers. They raise money to get him an entirely new wardrobe to make sure he is looking fabulous all the time. And they keep bringing him out in masks to dance in front of the king, because he's such a graceful, beautiful dancer. And they want to keep putting him out there and just shunting him in every chance they get. And it fucking works. And Villiers, he is rising through the ranks. Meanwhile, Robert Carr ends up in a massive murder scandal and loses the favour he does have with the king and basically seals his own fate with regards to that. And that is a whole other story, and I have to tell you about Frances Howard sometime. She is such an interesting woman. But yeah, Villiers is moving up nobility. When he's 22, he is knighted Gentleman of the Bedchamber. The year after, he becomes King Masters of the Horse, and he gets moved up in sort of the peerage. He becomes Viscount Villiers. He's a Knight of the Garter. And then he becomes an Earl, and then he becomes a Marquess of Buckingham. And finally, in 1623, when he's, 29, 28, he is named the Duke of Buckingham. Now, the thing about dukedom is it's supposed to be limited to relatives of the royal family, the nobility, the high nobility. It's supposed to indicate a connection and a closeness there. Now, George Villiers is often referred to as the first Duke of Buckingham, and that's kind of true, but kind of not. So back in the 1400s, there was a Duke of Buckingham, and this lasted for a good while, and then the title ends up being dissolved. And it's only when George Villiers gets moved up into the nobility, up the peerage, that the king bestows this upon him, thus making him the new sort of first Duke of Buckingham. It's kind of like a reboot, if they've just rebooted the title. But that's not the only name that King James gives him. He calls him Steenie, right? And it's supposed to be a sort of nickname based on Saint Stephen, who, according to, hagiographies and whatnot, had the face of an angel. He's basically calling him, super gorgeous. So yeah, face of an angel and a title that had been defunct for a whole century. This is actually a really, really big deal, because this was the first time, this appointment was the first time in literally 100 years that the king had elevated sort of one of the common people to dukedom. Nobility and class and peers, they're so weird. The British class system is very peculiar. Villiers is one of the youngest sons of a minor noble. It's not really that big of a deal. So he's minorly noble. Compared to royalty, that's common. And so he gets moved up the ranks, and this is unusual. But it was very more than unusual, actually. It was absolutely shocking for a lot of people at the time. And so many people had banded together to try and push this to happen. They had just really wanted to get him into this position. They wanted to elevate him to this role. And King James was clearly smitten with his new beau. So much so that when George moved up the ranks, so did his family. He boosted his brothers and his sister, and also his mum. So Mary, she ends up being sort of titled the Countess of Buckingham in 1618. So 3 years after himself becomes the cupbearer. She gets this title in her own right. And then she goes and marries more people, which is cool. Good for her. You're a lady in the past. You gotta grab what you can get, you know? Villiers starts off in this position. He becomes the king's favourite, put there by a bunch of people who just, really hated Robert Carr, the Earl of Somerset. And they really wanted to just use Villiers as this political pawn. Which is funny because he was so much worse than they ever thought he could be. I'm not saying they created a monster. No, I am saying that actually. They created a fucking monster.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players. Pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
Hello everyone, Stakuyi here.
And I'm Gabby.
And we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.
It's actually pretty funny that when Villiers first arrived at court, he already had some connections there, because back when he was in school, when he was young, he was Prince Charles's dance tutor. So Charles, the King James's son, he taught him how to dance. There was already a wee bond there, and now he's shagging his dad. I feel like that's a weird one, you know? And Villiers, he's got this, fantastic position. He's got all this money. He's got titles. Not bad for, the second last son of, a dead knight. But he's still relatively young, and he's got a lot to live up to, especially considering the fact that he's not exactly the first of James's lovers. I mean, you had Robert Carr, you had Esme Stuart, who converted religion to be with the king. It was a whole thing. And if someone's changing the religion for you, which, at this moment in time is a big bloody deal, your religion was more important than your race. Race is very much a social construct, because in this era, the colour of your skin was less important than your religion, because your religion was supposed to be the most important facet of your life. And so George Villiers, he's going uphill a wee bit. I mean, it's uphill, but he's got a railing to hold on to, because as time goes on, King James becomes super smitten. I mean, we've already got the cutesy wee nickname, right? And he's showering him with gifts and titles and money and all that shit. And he starts calling him, it gets worse. So we've already got Steenie, because he's super gorgeous. But he also refers to him as, and I shit you not, my sweet child and wife. Now, I don't care who you are, but if you try and tell me that King James I and George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, were just best friends, roommates, best buds, you can get to fuck. No, my sweet child and wife, sweet child and wife. I regret nothing. Like, no, that is an intimate relationship. And it gets weirder because, you know, the religion thing. So he's talking to like the Privy Council and the advisors, the king is, and he starts saying that George is like John, the apostle, and King James is Jesus, obviously, in this analogy, because he centers himself on everything. I mean, this is a man who didn't get assassinated, and we're still talking about it today. Like, the propaganda machine, really amazing. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Queen Anne of Denmark, who's married to King James I, does she have any opinions on this? Well, considering James is a generally shitty husband, and, you know, previously, queens have lost their heads. Probably having a wee think about that. She writes a wee letter to Villiers, becomes his pal, and is like, hey, stay true to my husband, you know? Probably because if he's happy, then she has to deal with less shit. So, cool. Oh my goodness, I should have mentioned that in 1620, George Villiers married Lady Catherine Manners, who was the daughter of the Earl of Rutland and the richest woman in England. Now, their marriage comes about because his mum is a sneaky bitch. On one hand, King James I denying this marriage, which is weird because he denies this man nothing. So he is denying him, and Mary is trying to sort out like the dowry. She wants the dowry from Catherine, and the Earl of Rutford's like, no, absolutely not, this ain't happening. And then a situation occurs where Catherine, who's ill, or she becomes unwell, and she's staying in an abode that George Villiers also happens to be in. So this creates like a wee bit of a scandal, and the Earl of Rutford is just like, you stayed unchaperoned with a dude? No. Like, he refuses to have her back, and he demands that they get married. And, you know, it would have been scandalous for this not to go ahead. And so this marriage just has to go together. Like, it's a political alliance, but they're also pretty chill with each other. They seem to be pretty good, and they end up having a decent few kids. Now, perhaps George Villiers is bisexual. I'm happy to assume that, because they had a good number of kids, you know, considering there really isn't a reason after two. Like, once you've got two, you're done. There's no reason to keep shagging. Meaning, I think maybe there was something there. I'm just saying. Anyway, they get married, and that's all fine and dandy. They start popping out puppies. Back to the palace. See, George Villiers and Catherine Manners, they actually get married a year-ish after Anne of Denmark passes away. And when the Queen dies, King James is writing letters to Villiers like, be my wife, come be my wife, which is not something that's going to happen. You know, this is the man who wrote the King James Bible, or commissioned the King James Bible, and professed that homosexuality was a sin, and then is like, marry me, George. Just saying, the numbers don't add up, and the points don't matter. And George, clearly the king's favourite, things are going well for him. He's got a marriage, he's got his place in court, he's got so much fucking money, like so much money, and he goes a bit mad with it, to be honest. He just gets a bit wild. Like, he has such influence over the kingdom, and he is in this weird position. It's such a unique position that he's able to take advantage in really weird ways. Like, they become wilder and wilder, that the public just start turning against him, you know? So he becomes friends with Sir Francis Bacon, and they become super close, and Villiers starts like helping Bacon's career advance, and he ends up basically making sure that Bacon gets appointed as the Lord Chancellor. And this is, a super cool fun time between them. But things start getting a wee bit dodgy. I mean, apart from the fact he's going full on Nepo baby, he's like using his position to get, bribes and gifts. He starts taking public funds and using it for his own benefit, really. He tries to create like monopolies all over the shop, especially where it's going to be like super beneficial to him. And he gets Francis Bacon involved in all this. Because he got Bacon the job, because he ensured he got the position, he starts expecting favours. And Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, gets the Lord Chancellor to basically pull these favours on Buckingham's behalf. And so money slides under the table here, a wee appointment happens there, and it's going well for a wee while until Parliament actually notices that something is amiss. And so, of course, there is a massive scandal, and Sir Francis Bacon is just like forced to retire. Meanwhile, himself, Buckingham, gets off scot-free, managing to escape unscathed from this corruption scandal. And he's just like this fucking puppet master at this point, fingers in many pies. And King James is the king, but the Duke of Buckingham, people start side-eyeing him and calling him the unchallenged ruler of England. And so he is very much trying to protect his position. And Parliament, not really too happy with this whole corruption situation, and they decide they're going to investigate more. And so they start diving into it. And Buckingham, he's like, absolutely, you have my support 100%, like in the initial stages. And then, like most criminals, tries to like insert themselves in the investigation. And then he just kind of throws a spanner in the works. He doesn't want, the news to get out. And so he causes like a bunch of issues between the lawmakers over foreign policy, and he just sort of sows the seeds just to ensure that they fight and that they are distracted from what they're supposed to be fucking doing. And so this works, and Parliament ends up dissolved because they just can't sort themselves out. And he just gets away with it. Falls into shit and comes out smelling of roses. Like, this dude, he's got all this power, and he's so fucking vain, by the way. Like, he is so vain. He is consistently, like, commissioning paintings for himself. How he has the time when he's constantly just, like, screwing around, like, figuratively and sometimes literally. Like, he's doing all this shit, but he's having time to pose for paintings. Like, the man clearly liked his own face. I mean, I can't say too much because I have taken so many selfies. But still, though, you're sitting for a painting. That's not exactly a short period of time. I mean, unless he just sat down for, like, the face and then got someone else to sit for the body, maybe. But yeah, the man loved attention. Like, he was always putting on, like, feasts and festivities and parties just so he could go up and dance. Because, it was the done thing. You danced at court. And he wanted all eyes upon him, because of course he did. The man bloody loved himself, and he thought he could do anything. He thought he was like the bee's knees, the cock of the walk, And he has to go to Spain with Prince Charles for like marriage negotiations because King James, he wants, Charles to marry a Spanish dignitary in order to secure an allegiance with Spain. So previously we had the whole situation with like the Spanish Armada and the constant warring between sort of Elizabeth and Spain. And James really didn't want to have to deal with that. Hence, marriage negotiations. So Villiers is there trying to organise this. See, Buckingham at this point, he is an admiral, a Lord Admiral, and not like an official foreign minister, but he basically is like a foreign minister. And so he's there trying to get this agreement hashed out between the Infanta Maria and Charles, right? That's the whole point. The negotiations, they hadn't really been going well anyway, but Buckingham is such a dick. Like, he insults the Spanish so much that not only does the negotiations just come crashing down, like they completely disintegrate. Not only that, but Spain contacts Parliament to execute the Duke of Buckingham over this whole incident. Like, they want him dead. Like, that is how much he insulted the Spanish. But Villiers, he is such... like I said, he's just such a chancer that when he returns to England, he makes this big song and dance about how over in Madrid, the Spaniards broke down the negotiations and insulted England. And it causes such a ruckus that he gets all this public support for them to go to war with Spain. He really leans into the patriotism and saves his arse, In the following year, having learned absolutely fucking nothing, they sent him off again to do the negotiations with France. Granted, this does turn out better because Henrietta Maria of France, they agree. They agree this marriage is going to go ahead. Charles and Henrietta Maria. Good to go. Fabulous. So this is all agreed upon. It's good. Unfortunately, when they return, the British public are really unhappy. The patriotism mentioned previously, because Henrietta Maria is Catholic. And they're like, this is a Catholic conspiracy. Which is weird because the previous year they're trying to get a marriage with Spain. Wouldn't the public have had the same issue? Because Spain, also a Catholic country, it would have been the same thing, the same problem. But yeah, public approval not going well. So his popularity decreasing steadily for the next year. And James I, basically, the favourite was falling out of favour. But luckily for the Duke of Buckingham, King James dies in 1625. And you'd think, shit, stuff's going to go really bad for Buckingham at this point. You'd be wrong. You'd be absolutely wrong. Because Charles is now King Charles I. He is the ruler and he keeps Villiers around. The Duke of Buckingham is basically his pal, He helped him get married. He helped him learn to dance. It's a special kind of bond, that is. But yeah, they are very close, to the point that he just becomes the foreign minister. That's his job now. That's his thing. And he's the only member of the previous court to keep his position. Sort of King James' court, when he dies, it gets dissolved. The courtiers just get, passed aside for whomever King Charles wants. And the Duke of Buckingham is the only one to keep his slot. I should mention, he's kind of doing well with France. Him and France are pretty chill. To the point that somehow, a couple hundred years down the line, he ends up as another piece of historical fan fiction because the Duke of Buckingham, George Villiers, shows up in The Three Musketeers, like, by Alexandre Dumas, who, if you remember, also wrote fan fiction about Marguerite de Navarre, Queen Margot, like the Philippa Gregory of the 19th century. Really had a thing for it. Like, imagine he must have had some kind of reputation because Dumas has a very specific fondness for people, especially royalty at this point. But Buckingham, he really was so charming. Like, he had the je ne sais quoi. He had that something about him because, like, he managed to enthrall, like, King James. And I swear this dude is, like, part siren because he also does the same for King Charles. Like, they are so... Like, Charles gives him more positions and more titles. Like, he appoints him the Chancellor of Cambridge Uni because the previous Chancellor had died. Like, he passed away, and instead of, picking someone who was qualified for the position, he put his pal in there. Nepotism. So basically, in order to become the Chancellor, there's like a vote that has to happen. So he's up for it, and then the son of the previous Chancellor are also up for it. So there's a bunch of votes, and they tally them up. And Villiers, he wins by 3 votes, right? And they're thinking, geez, that's a bit suspicious. Ugh. And they thought they'd been tampered with, they thought it'd been messed with, but, the king is standing next to him, so you can't really accuse him of shit. But yeah, the main theory is that he also cheated his way into the role. Remember how I said he was super chill with France? Well, effectively, he wants to get his popularity back up because people not took it with him, with the stealing the job and the whole Catholic bride thing and, all the other stuff. We need to get this sorted. And so what he does is he embroils himself in what is often referred to as the Catholic conspiracy. And so he wants to, fight against the Catholics and stuff and decides to fight against his own fucking allies, the French. And he thinks this is a great idea. Because, there's all of this, religious conflict happening in France at the time. And he decides to back the Protestant forces. This does not end well for anyone. I mean, it shouldn't, because most conflicts don't. And how to put this in ways that make sense, he absolutely sucks at this. So much shit happens under his watch, so much goes wrong. He buggers everything up. He fails to achieve strategic objectives. He doesn't equip the soldiers properly for any of their battles. Effectively, they don't have enough, ammunition, weapons. At one point, they were supposed to get on a ship and sail away, but they were waiting so long that they ate all the provisions aboard the ship while they were waiting for musket balls. The man absolutely sucked at military anything. Anything military, no good. Very bad. He did so many things wrong. At one point, he accidentally tips off the enemy about their tactics, about their plans, about their strategies. Sir, I feel like that's, the first rule. Don't. Just don't tell your enemies your plan of attack. Every single military operation that the Duke of Buckingham is involved in, everyone he touches just turns to shit. And it was not doing well for his public opinion. It gets to the point that he's just sucking so much that every battle failure just builds up. That not only is the public against him, but so is Parliament. And they start refusing all of these requests for taxes and funds. And so he can't pay for these like excursions for his attempt at warring. Like he just can't afford it because they're just refusing to sign the checkbook. And things aren't going well. Because the Parliament, they're just cutting him off, you know. They're ensuring that he doesn't have access to public money. And yeah, he goes bankrupt pretty quickly because the man clearly does not know how to be fiscally responsible. He tries to sort of get money in order to, you know, do the war. Like spending his own money, actually. And makes himself personally liable for paying off debts to several of his officers. Now, you're going to be shocked at this, surprised even. He could not manage to pay off said debts to the officers. And they waited 10 months because they were patient, you know. And after that, they thought, fuck this for a game of soldiers. And they just stole money. They just looted the king. They just looted it. They were like, gonna go into the king's stores and loot all the money we're owed. Cool. Good move there, lads. How that didn't sour him in the king's favour, I'll never fucking know. Because, like, people are coming in and stealing your money because this dude didn't pay them because he's just a consistent failure. Like, Parliament is so sick and tired of him that they try to get rid of him and get him impeached and shit. They want to, like, remove him from office. And they try and do this twice. However, both times they've tried to do this, in steps the king. He dissolves Parliament. He dissolves Parliament. Twice. He does it twice. Before they have the opportunity, before they can fill out all their forms and cross their T's and dot their I's, before they can go through the full process in order to get rid of him, the king comes in and just saves his ass. Which is not good, because it showed that Charles wasn't super, you know, loyal to his parliament and his country. He was more loyal to this one dude who kept fucking things up for the country. So again, popularity dwindling, very much dwindling. So public opinion very much in the vitriol stages at this point for Villiers. The Duke of Buckingham is so awful. Like, he is so bad and doing so many bad things consecutively, one after another in a row, that a conspiracy theory comes about that he's doing all these things because his doctor is practicing black magic on him. And, you know, that's a completely logical and reasonable explanation. Not that this one dude's just an idiot and an arsehole. But yeah, things don't go well because an angry mob gets together and they kill the doctor. They kill George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, his doctor. They're like, you're using magic on him, and beat him to death. But Buckingham, as always, undeterred. He's trying to get La Rochelle going on. He wants to continue this war that he has instigated, you know. And he's going down to Portsmouth to do it. And so he's there, just hanging about the Greyhound pub, when suddenly a man just lunges at him and stab, 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 stab. He is, like, violently stabbed. George Villiers shouts, "Villain!" pulls the knife from his body, stumbles forward a few steps before collapsing on the ground and bleeding to death. And so, on the 23rd of August, 1628, George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, dies 5 days short of his 36th birthday, after suffering a severe case of the murders. But who assassinated him It was a soldier called John Felton. So he had been on one of the doomed military campaigns with him, got severely injured, and then Buckingham passed him over for promotion. And Felton felt like he was owed, and that this man had fucked up his life, and he was going to deal with that. And he did. I mean, for Felton, it wasn't just like a personal situation. He felt like Villiers was like a tumour to Britain, and that he had to be cut out, like he had to be removed in order to protect the country. So not only was it personal revenge, he believed he was doing it for the public, for public interest. And in a move that surprised absolutely no one, the British public, they love John Felton. They think he's a hero. They're like, you got rid of the evil witch. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Witch, oh the wicked witch. Like, they're celebrating. Like, he effectively becomes a sort of folk hero in their eyes. So the public's really happy. Like, they're out celebrating and stuff. Like, they're having parties. And the king, not so happy about this. Also, Parliament aren't too cool with, royalty and nobility being stabbed in public, because it's not good for them, And so they're doing everything to, like, stop these celebrations happening. Like, the son of some scholar or whatever raises a toast to John Felton, and the king fines him, which, fine enough, that's grand, and then orders both of his ears to be cut off. Feels a bit extreme, but okay. So Felton, he is caught and he is hung, right? They just execute him, and they're going to put his body on display because, like, that'll deter the public. It actually had the opposite effect. So instead of being like a warning, the assassin's corpse becomes like this public attraction, and people are venerating it. They're like praising it. It has the complete opposite effect of what they wanted it to do. That's how much they hated Villiers, who ends up being buried in Westminster Abbey along with the monarchs. Like, he is buried in a place that's supposed to be for royalty, so just saying it's a bit weird, but clearly they had opinions on this, and there he's buried in a very fancy tomb, very lavish, very grand. And yeah, so ends the story of Sir George Villiers, the first Duke of Buckingham. If you liked my telling of this story, feel free to rate and review 5 stars. Give 5 stars. Why not? You deserve it. I deserve it. And you should do that. And you should also follow me on my socials. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Why not? And Threads. And whatever Twitter is called now. I'm on all the things. Message me, DM me. Talk to me on Threads. I'm everywhere. Oh, and over on the Patreon, we are currently doing Who Done It What Now, which is me reading a chapter of currently The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. I'm doing that every day. That's been released every day. I'm hoping to get a few like historical true crime things up there, and just some fun audio up. Get some more content out for you. And all of my live shows, they're going to be recorded and put on the Patreon as well, so they're going to be there. Now, of course, before I go, can't forget recommendation time. So, for watching Mary and George, go watch Mary and George. It's perfect. Listen to this and then go watch that. I feel like it's a good show. For listening, I've really been enjoying Katie Bazer's song I'm a Problem. Just hitting me right, Also, if you go onto TikTok and there's it's like Pop Goes Musical Theatre, they do a version of 1985 by Bowling for Soup, which if you put your earbuds in, if you're neurodivergent, it might just scratch you right at the back of your brain. It's so nice. For reading, so many options. Which one will I choose? It's actually been hard because I've actually been reading again this week. No, you know what? I'm going to give you a book recommendation based on something I want to read. So there used to be this sort of group of books called point horror, like point thriller and point romance, I think, as well. And they were young adult books. So you would go from Goosebumps to the point horror. So that was like you'd go from childhood Goosebumps, teenage, young adult, point horror. And I loved those books. R.L. Stine, who wrote Goosebumps, actually wrote some of these. And I remember specifically the boyfriend and the girlfriend. Like, the boyfriend was my favourite because every time I smell soap, I think of the boyfriend. It's just ingrained in me now. And I would love to start rereading those point horror books. And I haven't seen them in any bookstore in forever. So I don't know if they're just out of print or whatever. I have a Kindle. I'm sure I can find them. But I would love just a physical point horror book, like, so much. You have no idea. But anyway, that is my recommendation for now. And I hope you have a great week. Adios. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen, my friends. Bye-bye.